And welcome, everybody, to the Week 13 episode of the NFL Propcast. Here for the live stream, I'm your host of this episode, Scott Reichel, taking the place of Munaf. Munaf's busy, so I'm filling in once again for today. December, which sounds extremely crazy because it feels like the first 11 months kind of just went by like that. But I'm joined again by Lonte Smith, and we're going to break down the Week 13 Sunday card and get into the actual games, talking about some props. We'll wrap it up at the end with some touchdown scores. Lonte, been about a month since we've been on this show together. How's it going with you?
Pretty good, man. I think actually whenever you have been on the show, it's been two pretty good shows the last two times you've been on. So, man, I'm hoping that we can keep that going. I think me and Minoff have been doing okay, struggling a little bit to hit the touchdown parlay. But if you're round robining them, pretty much killing it. I think we've got like 3 out of 4 in like 4 of the past 5 weeks. So, yeah, man, I'm hoping that, you get here and we can put together something. But other than that, man, doing good. Hope you are as well.
Doing pretty well overall. Been busy kind of with other sports during the course of the weekend. College football, of course, pretty crazy yesterday.
Thank
Syracuse
God it's
money line,
over.
fun
Yeah,
ride. Syracuse money line, that was a good time.
Yeah.
But other than that, though, looking forward to breaking down all of the Sunday NFL games. Anyway, so without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with the first game, just going to go by ESPN's list here. We're going to cover all the games anyway. Starting off with the Chargers and Falcons game. Chargers are small favorites, about -1, and the over-under is around 47.5. Falcons off the bye. Last time we saw them, they got destroyed by the Broncos in their last game. Chargers, though, had a pretty underwhelming showing there on Monday Night Football as the Ravens wore them down, as the Ravens did win that game by 7 points in the end. Well, I'm going to start off with you, since it is expected to be a very close game. What's your prediction for the game script here? What props do you like for this game?
Yeah, so I'm expecting a lot of, well, not a lot, but I'm expecting a ton of energy and effort from Atlanta after that performance. I mean, we usually see teams bounce back, especially in the NFL when they come out and get buried like they did. One of the props that I'm looking forward to is Bijan Robinson. I like Bijan Robinson's passing. I mean, not passing. I like his rushing plus receiving yards. I think the Chargers struggle with dual threat backs. We saw them struggle with Saquon Barkley. I mean, to put it lightly. We saw them struggle against like a couple of other backs as well, and I think that this is a prime spot for Bijan off of a bye to be getting 25 to 30 touches. So I think Bijan over his rush receiving yards. I'm trying to I'll get an updated number while after you do your handicap. But that's one of the ones that I like on Atlanta side. On the other side, I like Quentin Johnston over 37.5 receiving yards. I think it's a little bit too low, too big of an adjustment. I mean, he was just 51.5 prior to the 0 catches, and he had opportunities. I mean, he just didn't haul him in. So his average line for the last 3 games has been 46.5. So I don't think one game constitutes nearly a 10-yard adjustment. So I like him over. He's over in 5 of 9. If you look at what receivers have done against this Atlanta secondary, Denver had 3 wide receivers to go 50+ yards. New Orleans, 2 players 50+ yards. Tampa Bay, 4 receivers with 38+ yards. So I think the opportunity will be there. I think they'll try to get him the ball early and often to kind of get him back in rhythm. So those are the 2 that I like. I like Quentin Johnston the most, over 38.5 yards.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with an actual under a 4 player here. I'm going to go with a player that's been really bad so far this season, but he's going to get a decent amount of workload, or he should, because Dobbins is now out.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't exactly trust him into this spot with potentially higher volume. Give me Gus Edwards under his rushing yards at 47.5. This is way too high. He's gone under in 7 of his last 9 games. He's averaging just 3.3 yards per carry this season. The Falcons have been pretty decent against the run, but you're looking at the options that the Chargers have. They have Haskins. They might put a Vital on the active roster in this game with Dobbins being out. Edwards expected probably about 10 to 12 carries in this game, so he needs to average about 4 yards per carry. Good luck with that. Once again, averaging 3.3 so far this season. I get the argument is his number's higher up there because he might get some workload. He also might not, because I don't think he's been good at all this season. Once again, if you're averaging 3.3 yards per carry, good luck. I'm assuming you're going to go elsewhere with the touches, but you might see Edwards as a short yardage guy, maybe a touchdown option. But getting around 47.5 yards is really asking a lot. I don't see him getting there. And I think the Falcons' run defense is good enough to keep the Gus Bus in check. So I'll go with the under on Edwards' rushing yards in that one. As for your Johnston play, I don't mind it. The issue is I'm not sure if Johnson can actually catch. But before last week, his line was in the 50s. You are getting a pretty good, I'd say, buy low spot on Johnson in this game. Besides that, thought about maybe going Cousins passing touchdowns. Probably not going to do it, though. I do like the Gus, once again, under his rushing yards. Think that's a pretty good spot to fade a running back who I don't think is very good at this stage in his career in 2024. Anyway, before we get into the other games on the card, do want to remind you once again, though, that you can use the I'd say sign-up code for the Propcast. And a reminder that you could also make your own account on Underdog Fantasy because we're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up the promo code SGPN. You could use the promo code MACHINE as well if you want to. Point is, though, when you sign up, use that promo code and get a 50% deposit bonus up to 1K. Underdog Fantasy promo code MACHINE. Plus, a reminder, we're also brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football, the NFL with Rhythm. Get a 7-day free trial today. Become to sports.com, RATHMM. Moving on to the next game on the card. Going to look at a matchup between the Steelers and the Bengals. Should be a fun one. Bengals are favored by 3, despite being 4-7 against an 8-3 team. The over-under in this game is around 46.5. Well, Lonte, I'm going to ask you because the Bengals are projected to win this game, even though they can't really stop anybody on defense. So starting off with your thoughts on this game, what props do you like?
Yeah, so this is a tough game for me as far as prop wise and side wise as well. So I kind of stayed away. I'll tell you the few that I was looking at. I was gonna look at some tight end stuff for Cincinnati, but the thing is, they have been spreading it out with Higgins being back. So I wanted Gesicki because you can attack the middle of the Pittsburgh defense, but I'm just not sure how much like volume he'll get. And I know the Pittsburgh corners has been pretty good, but you're going to be without Highsmith on one side, so they can add some extra attention to TJ Watt. So I think that I think they can kind of get the ball. I think Joe Burrow can kind of hold the ball a little bit longer, and that can open up the tight ends. But I didn't take it because I just don't know the volume on the Pittsburgh side. I mean, you never really know with Pittsburgh. I mean, they're going to just target Pickens a ton. They're going to use a ton of backs with Warren, Harris, and then sprinkle in some Patterson as well. So I kind of stayed away from the game. I'm hoping that you got something for me.
Yeah, so for this one, I think I just actually like longest completion for Russ in this one. Even though you're looking at the Bengals' defense, which has not been very good, they've allowed a bunch of big plays as well. We know Russ is not afraid to take a deep shot to Pickens here or there, but the Bengals give up a ton of big plays through the air. You might remember the Baltimore game. They give up like 2 separate 50-yard bombs in that one. The point is the Bengals' secondary has been very suspect, and I do think with Russ, even if he doesn't have the greatest game overall, he's not afraid to take deep shots, and you might be able to find potentially Pickens, maybe Calvin Austin downfield. But I think you're looking at a spot where the longest completion's around 38.5. I think that does feel a bit low to me. I think that Wilson could go over this number. He's done well going over this number recently, and I do think with that being the case, that could be a potential option. Don't mind Burrow pass attempts over in the game as well. I think Burrow is going to potentially throw the ball 40 times. We know that the Bengals are in must-win territory, being 4-7. The only saving grace of their offense right now is the passing game because Burrow's had an MVP caliber year. He's not going to win it because, of course, their team's not any good. But his stats are great, and they have a hard time running the ball with Chase Brown. I think you're going to see the Bengals, I don't want to say abandon the run game, but I do expect them to lean on their best players for the course of this game. So I don't mind Burrow going over his attempts at around 36.5 for this game. Moving on, though, to the next game we're going to talk about. You have a matchup between the Cardinals and the Vikings. Unfortunately, probably not going to see Daniel Jones in this game, but Vikings are favored by 3.5. For this one, though, the Cardinals and the Vikings have been pretty good this season. Both teams, I believe, are playoff teams. Not sure about Arizona, actually, because that whole NFC West is an absolute crapshoot right now. Point is that the Vikings have been good. They're going back home after having a decent amount of games on the road lately. Lonte, I'll ask you about this game. Should be a fun one. Total is pretty, I'd say decently high. It's at 44.5. But I'm going to ask you on this one, what do you like for this game?
Yeah, I love Marvin Harrison in this game. Over 54 receiving yards. I'll probably ladder him up. I mean, Minnesota's elite against the run, but they struggle in coverage. They've allowed 100-plus wide receiver in 6 of the last 9.
They're allowing the fewest rushing yards per game in the entire league.
Yeah. They're really elite against the run. So they've allowed a 100-yard wide receiver in 6 of the last 8, and this is not including a tight end. who also went over last game. Hawkinson and Addison both had 100+ yards. So their coverage is not good, but they can stop the run. So if you want to look at some Connor unders, but I think Kyler will be able to spread it out. I think that RPO could give them some issues with the defense. Marvin's getting consistent target share, so the volume should be there, but he's just been kind of inconsistent as far as his numbers wise going over this number. So I think against this defense, he'll have the perfect target share, and all it takes is one bomb, and then we're halfway there. So I like Marvin Harrison over 54 receiving yards. I'll be laddering him up to like 100+.
Yeah, so we're on the same page. But we're going to go different players because I think Harrison Jr. has been a bit quiet lately. Yes, he is in line for a potentially solid game based on the matchup. Instead, I'm going to go with a kind of a secondary option in the receiving core for Arizona because I do think the line is too short. I'm going to go Michael Wilson, and I'll go with his over receiving yards. It's only 29.5, which feels very low. We're looking at the Falcons. Not the Falcons, sorry. Look at the Vikings giving up a lot of big plays. I mean, if you want to go through the actual passing yards for the last couple of games, Caleb had about 330. So that tells you that, once again, the secondary has been struggling a bit lately. Game before that, Minnesota faced off against Will Levis. Levis had 295. Like, they've been giving up a ton of passing yards. I don't mind Wilson at 29.5. He can get there in one catch. But he's a deep play receiver. I think he can potentially get there with a couple of targets as well. Give me Wilson over maybe a ladder opportunity if you think he's got a shot to get to like 50. But I think that 29.5 is a bit too low, especially at minus 110 on FanDuel. I'll go with the over on Wilson's receiving yards for that one. Moving on to the next game on the card, match between the Colts and the Patriots. Damn, this game's ugly on paper. Both teams are not very good. Richardson, though, is going to be starting again. Probably the lowest completions line I've ever seen. I don't remember what Tebow's completion line used to be, but his completions are at 14.5. Just to ask you about this game, what do you like? Because it's supposed to be pretty windy over there in Foxborough, and with that being the case, it's supposed to be cold. So I like the attempts for Stevenson at like 14.5. I think that's too low. The fumbling was an issue earlier this season. He's been a lot better at it for the last month or so. But Stevenson's at 14.5 even money. If the game's going to be close and it's going to be pretty windy, why would I assume they're not going to give the ball to Stevenson blindly about 20 times?
Yeah, and I think my play kind of aligns with yours. So I like Drake May over 253.5 pass plus rushing yards. I think he'll be pretty much influenced by the weather, and he'll be able to run the ball. I mean, he's getting like 4+ carries. This is just design carries. He's getting 4+ design carries in like 4 of his last 5. He's over this number in 5 of his last 7. Indianapolis's pass defense is atrocious, so he could be able to check it down to Stevenson. They would run a lot of short stuff instead of throwing the ball deep. You don't have a ton of weapons. I mean, Hunter Henry over the middle is a pretty good target, but they don't have a ton of wide receivers that can separate. So I can see the backs out of the backfield like Stevenson. So maybe if you want to take a Stevenson, rush plus receiving, or maybe catches. Like you want to take receptions and then the rushing attempts. I like the rushing attempts angle, but I like Drake May to kind of get it done against a poor Indianapolis defense. Especially Drake May's been performing a lot better at home. And I mean, Indy's defense is going to allow him to get whatever he wants, especially on the ground. So I like Drake May to have a big day here.
Yeah, I think he could be in line for a good game too, but I think I'll stick with Stevenson just based on the weather in Foxborough. I see a pretty standard, I'd say, game script, at least for New England. They're going to try to run the ball, keep May upright, and they'll go from there. Mm-hmm. So I like the Stevenson rush attempts personally in this game. Moving on to the next game, you have the Seahawks against the Jets. The Jets are laying 1. Sure. Okay, good luck with that. Point is, though, the over-unders are around 41.5. Seattle's been pretty good lately. They're tied for first place. And the Jets, we know, are an absolute dumpster fire. So for this actual matchup, what do you like?
I like Breece Hall under 91.5 rush receiver yards, just for the sheer fact that I think this line is a little bit, it didn't get adjusted enough.
Yeah.
I mean, he was banged up all week, and now he's going to go. So, I mean, I think his touches will be limited, especially in the run game. Seattle's run defenses looked a lot, I mean, small sample size, but after the bye, it looked like they found something with the interior. They're getting guys back healthy. So I think that they'll be able to kind of contain Breece on the rush standpoint. Passing the ball out of the backfield, they pass the ball out of the backfield a ton, so they are more equipped to kind of deal with the dual threat backs. Now they haven't had success earlier on in the season, but in certain spots they've been good. And I think Brees Hall, just his health is a big concern here, because one wrong turn or wrong hit, and he could be out for a quarter or half the series or whatever the case may be. So I'm going under 91.5 rush receiving yards on him. And on the opposite side, I like Kenneth Walker over 88.5 rush receiving yards. That's at -115. I mean, he's getting a ton of targets. Like I was saying, he's getting a ton of targets out of the backfield. He's had 3+ receptions in 6 of his last 9. If you look at what dual threat backs have done against the Jets, Connor 111, Mixon 106, Harris 102, Ray Davis 152, and a lot of those guys are getting a ton on the ground. I mean, they can't stop the run. They're allowing 130 plus rush yards on the year. Kenneth Walker is going to get a ton of volume in the pass game. He can catch 3 balls for about 30-ish yards, and I think he can get the rest on the ground. So Kenneth Walker over 88.5 rush receiving yards, -115.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw another rushing option. I'm going to go with Geno Smith, actually, who's randomly been good lately running the ball.
Yep.
Looking at Geno's numbers here, Geno has recorded at least 15 rushing yards in 4 of the last 5 games. Faced off against the Jets a couple years ago, and he ended up having 18 in that game as well. But I think the line's too short at 12.5. We've seen him be a bit more mobile. You're looking at the offensive line not being great, and I do think that they might force him out of the pocket a time or two. Maybe he'll scramble with some improvisation, but I think 12.5 is too low. Give me the over on that one. Don't mind Rodgers' interception at plus money. I think that was like plus 120. I don't mind it. We've seen them, especially when they're trailing in the second half of games, kind of force it up there. I can see Seattle being opportunistic, maybe picking one off. Don't mind that, though, at plus money. Moving on to the next game. You have the Titans against the Commanders. Commanders are laying 6. The over-unders are around 44.5. Tennessee, nice win last week against Houston. As for the Commanders, they lost to the Cowboys. So probably not a good sign. For this matchup, though, Lonte, what do you like?
Yeah, that wasn't a good, but I think they buried Tennessee here. So I'm gonna go with Jaden Daniels. Let me make sure his number is updated. Over 38.5 rushing yards. That's at -120. He was more efficient coming off the bye. He had 6 for 74 last week. If you look at what he's been doing, he was been banged up before they went into the bye, so he wasn't running as much. And then we saw him, get a little bit more involved in the run game. Eckler's not there. I think they'll rely on Jaden Daniels to kind of move the chains on 3rd and short. Whereas they have him in for passing downs. And I don't think Brian Robinson is like a pass catching back. He's more of a bruiser. He's over in 8 of his last 11. He's averaging 43 rushing yards at home, and he's over in 4 of his 5 home games. If you look at what dual threat backs have done against Tennessee, Tennessee's elite against the pass. They really cut off a lot of the deep stuff. They don't allow a ton, and Washington's not really pushing the ball down the field to wide receivers anyway. They're getting a lot involved with the tight ends, using Eckler. Drake May, 95 yards. Justin Herbert, 32. They only face a few dual threat backs, but I really think that, I think that Daniels will be able to stand up and be healthy here with the offensive line. I think he'll be able to move the ball. I think you should see at least 5 or 6 design runs for him. So give me Jaden Daniels over 38.5 rushing yards.
Yeah, so for me, I think I actually am going to kind of consider fading this Commanders defense, which has not been great lately. I don't mind a potential same-game parlay. It's going to be reverse correlated, so you can actually get a decent price. Westbrook-Akina to go over his receiving yards and under his receptions. So basically 2 receptions for 40 yards, pretty standard. He's gotten there the last 2 games. Plus 850, which I think is a pretty good price. I'll go with that. We know that he's been catching some deep balls from Levis, then vanishing for the rest of the game. So I don't mind that happening again. Give me Westbrook-Akina to have a solid game in terms of yards, but not in terms of receptions. Give me the same game parlay at around plus 850. Moving on to the next game. Going to look at the matchup between where do I want to go next? Okay, for this one, we'll go with the Texans against the Jaguars. Texans only laying 3.5 off the loss to the Titans last week. Jacksonville's off the bye, but damn, this team sucks. Total's 44.5. Trevor Lawrence might play. He's questionable. We'll see what happens. I mean, a lot of this is going to depend on if Lawrence plays or not, but let's assume Lawrence plays. If he plays, what do you like in this game?
Yeah, so I'm staying away from them altogether. I just don't know what, I don't know the status of what he'll be doing and his health.
And Mac Jones isn't any good. So.
Yeah, so I'll just stay away completely. One of my favorite props on the day is CJ Stroud over 261.5 passing yards and over 1.5 touchdowns. I'm going to ladder him up to like 3+ touchdowns. He had 345 in the last meeting. If you look at what he's been doing, he's averaging almost 270 when Nico Collins plays, and Nico Collins is in. So if you want to look at his player prop over, I would look at that. He's been really, really good. He's averaging 309 yards in 3 career games versus Jacksonville, including that 345-yard game in the first meeting. His touchdowns, man, he has 6 touchdowns to 0 interceptions as well. 3 of his 4 multi-touchdown games have been against division opponents, so he's thriving in a division. He's just struggling elsewhere. And we saw what Detroit did to this defense. I mean, Goff had 412 yards before the bye. Now they're pretty banged up in the secondary as well. Don't think any of that continues. So give me CJ Stroud to have a monster day. I'll ladder him up to like 325. I think he has a monster day. Him and Collins both.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Once again, I think for this one, I am expecting Lawrence or Mac Jones to run for their lives for the course of this matchup. The Texans defense has not been good lately, but they are good at one thing. They're really good at pressuring the quarterback, and I don't mind potentially going for sacks in this game. I know FanDuel tends to have some like game specials, which I think could be a tempting option. Quickly kind of find if I could actually check out the sacks for this matchup, if I could actually locate it. Let me just see if I could actually find the sacks for this game. So the Texans to get 5 sacks in this game is plus 650. 6 sacks is 15-1. Sure. They had like 7 sacks in the first half against Tennessee last week. I'm not against that. I think that could be a good option. I'll give me the Texans to record 5+ sacks at plus 650 in this upcoming game. Moving on to the next matchup. Going to go to the matchup between the Rams and the Saints. Rams are laying 2.5 after Saquon basically became the owner of the franchise. The over-under is around 49.5. So the game's going to be in New Orleans, going to be in a dome. New Orleans has been underwhelming, but better since they fired Dennis Allen. Lonte, I'll ask you, what do you like in this game?
Man, another quarterback who I really like to have a monster day. I like Stafford over 260.5 passing yards. His passing touchdowns is juiced. I would look at a 2.5. You can probably get plus money on that. Just a 1.5 is a little bit too juiced. I think he's got 10 touchdowns in his last 4 games. I think he had 4, 0, 2, and 4. Or 4, 0, 4, and 2, something like that. But I think 10 touchdowns in his last 4 games. So the offensive line is getting a little bit healthy. New Orleans secondary has been torched all year. Jameis torched them for 395. Kirk had 306. Herbert 279. Baker 325. And Stafford's over this number in 4 of his last 5 games. So he's getting a ton of attempts. I think the way to attack this New Orleans defense is through the air. So I look for Stafford to have a monster day as well, similar to what Stroud is going to have. So I like him over 260.5 passing yards.
Yeah, so for this one, I think we're going to end up getting a pretty fun game that could go either way. The one thing I do know, though, is the Rams are really not good against, I'd say, running backs, or at least stopping the run. So I actually don't mind Taysom Hill in this game. I think he's in a good spot. We saw Saquon go for 255 yards last week, and I think you're looking at what should be a pretty solid rushing attack from the Saints. So I don't mind. I mean, Kamara hasn't been that efficient on the ground this year. Hill's been used a lot. I think after last week, the entire game plan is going to be to run the damn ball. So I don't mind going for Taysom to go over his rushing yards. Maybe Taysom touchdown in this game. For the Rams in this one, I feel like if I was going to go with an option, it probably would involve the main weapons, either involving Kupp or even Nakua. Maybe if you want to go for like Stafford touchdown passes, I don't hate it. I think that could be an option. Maybe MVS for the Saints could have a solid game, but they can't stop the run. I think the Saints kind of lean into that. I'll go with Taysom Hill to have a pretty good game in this one. Moving on to the next game. We're looking at a matchup between the Buccaneers and the Panthers. Buccaneers laying 6.5 on the road, and the over-under is around 46.5. Panthers almost beat the Chiefs last week, which apparently means nothing because so did named O'Connell, and they eventually fell short on Friday. So Bryce Young was great last week, but they gave up 340 yards to Aiden O'Connell. So I don't really know what to read into for that one, but I'll ask you for the actual Panthers. A couple guys banged up with Coker and Sanders being out for basically the season at this point. What do you like in this game?
Yeah, man, you led me right into this play. I like Xavier Legette. I like his receiving yards over, but I love his longest reception over 18.5. I mean, he's over in 4 straight. He's at 23 plus longest reception in all of those. Banged up wide receiver core. So I think we see a ton of volume with him and Thielen. So I think he's going to see a lot of volume. Tampa Bay 29th in pass defense. And if you saw last week, he had that big missed opportunity that he talked about. And I guess him and Bryce talked about it. So I expect him to get a ton of volume here. I mean, one catch, literally, he can take it. He can take it to the house. He's got Deebo Samuel-esque. He's a Deebo Samuel-esque wide receiver. So a lot of tunnel screens. a lot of stuff over the middle, but he can take the top off the defense. And if Bryce can get time to throw it down the field, I think he has a good shot to go over this number pretty quickly today.
Yeah, I don't mind that as well. Looking at what I think for this game, I like Thielen. Same argument that you had, but Thielen we know has been a pretty steady piece in this offense when he's healthy. Snap count was pretty low last week, was at 61% first game back off of IR, and he still had about 50-plus yards. So I don't mind him going over. Tampa allows a ton of passing yards, whether it involves garbage time or not. So I think Leggett could have a solid game, but he's mostly been a red zone threat. The yards haven't really been there for him.
Yeah.
Thielen's been dangerous for most of the field anyway. So I like Thielen to go over. Don't mind the potential receptions for him as well. But I think it's a good spot for Thielen in this matchup. I'll go with his over. Only 39.5, which is very low for a potential number one receiver on the depth chart. Give me Thielen to go over his receiving yards in that game. Moving on to what could be the game of the day. Just to ask, by the way, on this show, do we cover the Sunday night game? I forgot.
Yeah, Sunday night, no Monday night.
Okay, so the second to last game we're going to talk about, you have the Eagles against the Ravens. The Eagles off a nice road win against the Rams. The Ravens off a nice road win against the Chargers. So both teams are traveling back from LA. For this one, though, the Ravens are -3, and the over-run is around 50.5. Some news last night, Devontae Smith's going to try to play in this game warming up. I don't know if he's going to actually play. I'd assume he's not going to because they won last week, and they're kind of running away with the NFC East. So I'll assume he's not going to play, but there's a chance he does play. Lonte, I'll ask you, another Ravens secondary has been a mess. Was better last week, mostly because Quinn Johnson couldn't catch. Before this matchup, what do you like?
Yeah, I think this is a tough game to like handicap. I mean, Baltimore secondary is really, really, really bad. But do you trust Philadelphia to kind of take advantage of that? I mean, I really don't. But this is going to be an unpopular play, I'm pretty sure. But I like Saquon Barkley under 88.5 rushing yards. Baltimore's rush defense is elite. They're second behind Tennessee in rush yards allowed. No running back has a rush for over 70 yards versus them. So I think the way to attack Baltimore is through the air. So they should rely on Hurts to kind of, in the pass game, to kind of attack the secondary. I'm pretty sure Barkley's going to get his touches, but I think Baltimore will be more than equipped to handle it. So I like Barkley under 88.5 rushing yards, -115-ish.
Yeah, I don't mind that either. I think if I was going to go with an option for Barkley, it might be receiving yards, maybe longest reception in this game. Baltimore's not been great against anybody when it comes to actually stopping the pass. Running backs have been kind of a weakness for them as well. So I don't mind Barkley potentially catching a long pass. We saw him catch for, I think it was 50 and change, maybe like high 40s last week against the Rams. Then that could translate into this game as well. So I like that angle quite a bit. If you want to go for Goddard, they're not good against tight ends either for yards, so maybe Goddard has a decent game. If you're looking at Devontae probably being out, that might result in more options in terms of tight ends or even running backs for Hurts. So I don't mind that as an option as well. But yeah, then that's basically going to cover it for my thoughts on this game. Thought about maybe going Mark Andrews under because the Eagles have actually been good against tight ends, but I think I'll stay away from that. I'll just go with the fading of Baltimore's pass defense because why not? They're awful at stopping the pass. Moving on to the last game, you have a potential snow game between the 49ers and the Bills. 49ers have Purdy at quarterback. I'm not sure how healthy he's going to be, but he's going to be playing. For the Bills, they are 9-2. I believe if they win, they clinch the division. So pretty important game here for Bills Mafia. Once again, laying 6.5. Over-under is 44.5, and it should be snowing with about 30 mile per hour. I should say 30 degrees with probably a wind chill below that. Yeah, you have a West Coast team traveling east to the snow. So I guess the question is, what exactly do you like in this game? Because I'm expecting Buffalo to be physical. I'm not sure the Niners are going to be, but it's a must-win game. So what do you think you're going to get from these two teams?
Yes, I think we're going to get a low-scoring affair. I mean, Buffalo is obviously more accustomed to playing at home in these elements. I think San Francisco kind of just runs the ball. They want to keep Purdy out of the way. So I like him under 240. Let me make sure this is right. 224, I'm sorry, and a half passing yards. I just think that he'll be able that they won't put him in harm's way. I mean, we don't know how healthy he is. Obviously, a big game for them to win. They believe, which I believe too. After watching Allen last week, he gives them the best chance to win, whether he's 60%, 70%, or whatever the case may be. So I like him under. Bills should be able to, they should be able to be physical, like you mentioned, at the point of attack. Is Trent Williams back in?
I know he's been battling, I believe it was an ankle issue. I think he's going to suit up. I don't know if it was actually confirmed or not, but
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
assuming he's going to end up playing.
Yeah. So and he's banged up as well. So I just think that there'll be a lot of like
I
check
mean, he
down stuff.
barely practices during the week anyway when
Yeah.
he's
Yeah. That's true.
healthy. So,
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
don't know if it actually matters.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they do a lot of short stuff to Debo, to Christian McCaffrey. I don't think they take a ton of deep shots. So I think they keep it right at the line of scrimmage, especially in the conditions, run the ball a ton and get it and try to get out of there with a low scoring win if they can. So I like him under 224.5 passing yards.
Yeah, I thought about Shakir over the 5.5 receptions. It's plus money, actually, plus 119. He's had at least 6 catches in 5 straight. I get the argument is it's going to be snowy, but Shakir's the, of course, safety valve of this team, where they're going to be trying to check it down to him a bit more. I don't expect many deep shots from Buffalo, but I think they can find Shakir in some good one-on-one spots. Don't mind him getting a decent amount of short pass, I say, attempts in his direction. So I don't mind Shakir going over his 5.5 receptions at plus 119. Besides that, you mentioned Debo. To be honest, I might go with the under on Debo. He's been awful for basically the entire year. And I get the argument is, Buffalo might end up giving up some dinking and dunking, but I mean, he's had less than 23 yards in back-to-back games. You could argue last week shouldn't count because Purdy wasn't in the lineup, but yeah, he has not been very good.
Yeah.
Like, I got nothing else to add there. So Debo, I'm going to kind of stay away from, or at least consider the under, because damn, he's been a non-factor for this team for the entire season, and you're hoping he'd be better once Ayuk went down. Didn't happen. Instead, Juwan Jennings kind of emerged as a solid option. But yeah, Debo's been a mess. So I don't mind Debo maybe under, maybe receiving and rushing. He's kind of done nothing in the ground game this season as well. So bad year for Debo. He's podcasting, if that counts. So we'll
Oh,
see
is
if
he?
that. I know he has been. I think he's appeared on the Kay Adams show a couple times, I think. Maybe a different show, but I don't want to say he's the new Paul George or is the NFL version of Paul George, but let's say the podcast might be doing better than the performance on the field right now. So I'm not a fan of Debo's performance this season. I'm not going to back him because of it. I'll go elsewhere for my options. Maybe if you want to go for Purdy interception or Purdy rushing yards, maybe Allen and Purdy rushing yards could be a decent combo for this game. But in the snow, you might see more, I'd say, dependency on the ground game for these teams, especially Buffalo, after we saw Jacobs kind of run through this team last week.
Yeah.
Don't mind potentially Allen rushing yards or rushing attempts in this game as well. Anyway, time to wrap it up with the actual touchdown picks from both of us. Lonte, let you go first. What is your favorite touchdown pick for Week 13?
Oh, my favorite touchdown prop. Let's see. Let's go with damn, it's a couple that I like that I'm trying to figure out. Let's go with Quentin Johnston.
Do we have an official, I'd say, line that we have to reach for the threshold for touchdowns for price?
No, what we usually do is we just give out like 2 of our favorites, and then we just like parlay them together. It doesn't really matter.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it had to be like plus money or how we were doing this. Okay.
No, I mean, yeah, whatever. Look, winner is a winner.
Yeah, that's fine.
You don't have to worry about that. So yeah, I like Quentin Johnston. I'm trying to find his price. Give me 1 second so I can find his price. Where is he at?
I can quickly shop and tell you what the best price is.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the best price.
So his best price is plus 270 on DraftKings.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, he has scored in 4 straight before that game. Like I said, I'm expecting him to have a big game against his secondary. Atlanta can't get a pass rush at all, so like I think Herbert should be back there all day in halftime, and I think he'll actually catch the ball today. So let me get Quentin Johnston at plus 275.
Yeah, so the last time I was on the show, I ended up giving out Taysom Hill for a touchdown, and that won. So I'll go back to it. Taysom Hill's around plus 125. I like the price quite a bit. I think it's a good spot for Taysom. He had 3 touchdowns last week. You're also looking at him being, once again, the main goal line threat for this team on the ground. And the Rams not great at stopping the run game. So I think Taysom's going to get going. It's in a dome, pretty high total. So I see the Saints actually scoring in this game. But after Saquon ran through this defense, I think you're looking at what should be a pretty solid and simple, I'd say, game plan for New Orleans offensively, especially with their injuries after receiver. Run the damn ball. And we know that you're looking at Hill being the main goal line option. So give me Taysom Hill for a touchdown at around plus 125 in that one. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the Week 13 pregame show. Lonte, anything else you want to add before we officially end the show?
Not really, man. Oh, we can put together a underdog entry. We usually do that at the end as well.
Okay.
Just like we usually do 4, just 2 each. So if you got your favorite 2, I'll give you my favorite 2, and we can just put them together for an underdog entry.
Okay, so for the underdog entry, my first option, I'm going to go with Stevenson. I'll go with this higher, 13.5 carries. Most books have 14. Underdog does give you 13.5, which I do like quite a bit. I just see a pretty simple game script for New England. It's going to be cold weather. It's going to be windy, very windy in New England. I think Stevenson gets a ton of work. I think that we know that he's been the bell cow back for this team, for better or worse. Fumbling issues were a thing early in the season, not so much recently. He's definitely worked on the ball security, but with him being, of course, the main back there, they have Antonio Gibson, who's more of a pass catcher, but I think you're looking at Stevenson, who should at least get some work in this game. I don't trust the Colts to blow him out because that involves trusting Anthony Richardson to actually score points. So I'll go with the higher on Stevenson's rush attempts at 13.5 as my first choice. For my second choice, I think I am going to go with what do I want to go with here? You know what? I think I am going to go with the I'll go with the lower on Gus Edwards' rushing yards for this matchup. I understand that he's supposed to be the new starter. I don't know if he actually is. They have Vital out of Troy, who's not bad. They got Haskins, who can do a little bit of work. We know what he did in college. I think Gus Edwards isn't that good, just simply put. I think he's mostly a guy that's going to get you some short yardage conversions, maybe on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, but the yards per carry is abysmal, and it needs to probably average around 4 yards per carry. I don't see that happening. Give me Gus Edwards on his lower for rushing yards in this game.
Yeah, I love that. So my two will be, I'll start off with CJ Stroud, higher, 261.5 passing yards. I mean, just it's pretty simple. Jacksonville, they're not going to fix that pass defense off of a bye. Peterson, lame duck coach, probably going to get fired. He probably should have been fired, a month ago. But I mean,
they're just going through it. I think they realize they have a better chance of the number 1 pick if they keep Peterson. So they're just going to let him die.
Yeah, so
that's kind of where I'm at. I feel like the team knows, like, oh, they're going to lose anyway. Sure, we'll go for the number 1 pick.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, I mean, we saw Goff torch them before the bye. CJ Stroud's had extreme success against this team. It's small sample size, but he's threw for 309 average in his career, threw for 345 in his first meeting. I don't see any of that changing. So let's go higher on CJ Stroud's passing yards, which should be around 261 and a half. And let's go with another one of my favorites, Marvin Harrison, over 50, higher, 54 receiving yards. I mean, Minnesota's pass defense is just not good. They rely on a ton of getting a ton of pressure, but I think the RPO game can kind of keep them from pressuring Kyler because, I mean, he can take off one missed tackle and he can take off to the races. So I do think Marvin Harrison's getting consistent target. She's getting a consistent target share. Like I said, just been inconsistent. But Minnesota's pass defense, not that good. So I'm going to go with my two, Marvin Harrison higher, 54 receiving yards, and CJ Stroud higher, 261 and a half passing yards.
Yeah, I don't mind those plays either. But anyway, you can combine those 4, get yourself a nice underdog entry, and hopefully make some extra money on NFL Sunday. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the Week 13 Sunday games. Of course, I'll be back at some point for the Monday night game. Until next time, though, you can find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Find me on the tennis show, NBA show, etc., MLB show when the season does resume. Same with Lonte. Find him on the NBA show. Find him on of course, this show. And you can also find him on the MLB show. Till next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.